Delta Woodworking Machinery. A full line of precision chop tools. Available at woodworking dealers, hardware stores, and home centers. Delta. Serious woodworking tools since 1919.
Hi, I'm Scott Phillips with the American Wood Shop, and today we're going to cover how to get the most out of your lumber with a brand new planer from Delta. So let's head to the wood shop to see the latest in woodworking technology. Congratulations on the purchase of your new Delta 13-inch 2-speed finishing planer. It's a great tool, and in this video we're going to show you how to get the most out of this tool and how to use it. Now, there are some other tools that also complement this planer that will make your woodworking more enjoyable, easier to do, and ultimately better. And a 6-inch joiner is a great tool. Say you have a slightly warped or cupped board, you actually plane the surface on a joiner first before you bring it to a planer. I'll show you more on that. Dust collection, a great way to go. Now, you need the right dust collector with the hookups, and we'll get into that. And an ambient air cleaner. Well, that gets all that fine dust out of your shop air. So stay tuned. We'll get set up. I'll show you the paces on the brand new 13-inch 2-speed finishing planer. Now, before you get started, make sure you take the time to read, understand, and follow the instruction manual that comes with this tool. That will give you the ability to work safely and get the most out of the planer. Now let's look at what I consider to be the key feature. You have 2 speeds, one for dimensioning and one for the finished cut. Works great, gives you super smooth surfaces. Here, this is a full range depth stop. Now what that does, it gives you an accurate way to lock in the cutter head to give you repeatable, accurate dimensioning. Over here on this side is the patented cutter head lock. By locking the cutter head, that virtually eliminates snipe. Other features are the blade zero indicator, which is an easy way to set the cutter head knife to the exact top thickness of the material that you've been planing. Makes additional adjustments easy. The oversized cutter head height handle adjustment and the indexing ring for fine adjustments. This planer also features high-speed M2 steel double-edged knives that are reversible for 2 cutting surfaces. You have a top view depth scale so that you don't have to bend over to read your depth of setting for your cuts. You have large chrome in-feed and out-feed tables. And finally, there's a material passback roller that when you're dealing with longer boards, it's a great way to feed the workpiece back to the front to do more planing. There are 4 great accessories with this planer. The first one, a really good tool to have, is the 4-inch reversible dust chute. That way you can position your hose for your dust collector to the left or the right, depending on how your shop's set up. Next, it's always a good idea to have an extra set of replacement knives. That will help to eliminate downtime in your wood shop. And finally, if you have a small shop, these 2 accessories make good sense. This is called the universal stand, and it does several things for you. Puts a planer off of your workbench, so that frees up workspace. Plus, it's also setting up the planer bed at the right height to plane lumber efficiently. And this mobile base makes great sense because you can roll it where you need it for the job and then tuck it away when you're done. Now you're almost ready to use your planer, but there are 3 things I want you to think about before you fire it up. Number 1, make sure you secure the planer either to the universal stand or securely to the workbench. Follow the instruction manual for details. Also, when you position the planer, you want plenty of room on the in-feed and the out-feed so that the board safely can be planed down. And ultimately, you want to set it up for dust collection. We'll cover more about that later. Now that you have your finishing planer set up, it's time to get to work and plane down some boards. Now let me give you a few tips. First off, the planer is going to produce 2 perfectly smooth plane surfaces. That's so you can finish your furniture, make cabinets, makes your work a lot easier. But to get the best results, here are some tips for you. First off, if the board's perfectly flat, you can't take it right to the planer. But boards rarely are perfect, and usually they'll have twists, warps, or cups. Now, what you do is you take a cup board and you put the warp surface down on the surface of a joiner, and that's called surface planing. And what that will do is give you a good foundation that in turn you can bring over to the planer, flip the jointed side down, and then plane the top surface smooth. That's a good way to add value to the work that you do. A joiner is a good companion tool to this planer. A really handy thing to have. Now, when it comes time to get the most out of your planer, the 2 speeds are key here. That's going to give you the best finish. If it's hardwoods or softwoods, first start at the dimensioning speed. That will take a lot of material off very quickly. Once you have it down or near the finish pass, you can flip the speed switch over, and only do that when this is running. Never do it when it's off. And at the finishing speed, what that does, it gives you more cuts per inch, and that gives you a super smooth finish. Now, another tip that I have for you, how do you eliminate snipe? What's snipe? Well, snipe is that dip down in the final length of the board, either on one end or the other. Well, here's the tip. First off, make sure that the cutter head lock is engaged. And this is a unique cutter head lock, the only one of its type where you have the pressure bar right over the cutter head. And that will give you a much better result than any other planer out there. So what you want to do, here's one good tip for you. As you start a longer board in, and on long boards it's good to have an in-feed roller or an out-feed roller or a friend for extra support and help as you plane the boards down. But as you ease a long board in, try this, it works. Slightly raise up on one end of the board to make sure that this end stays flat to the table, that the cutter head does not actually lift the board up in the cut and remove or a little bit more material and create that snipe. And you want to do the same thing on the far end. Lift it up gently. That'll give you the best results when you're using your new planer. Okay, you're ready to start your project. Well, the first step in prepping your lumber is to do what's known as S4S. That means surfacing 4 sides. That means the 2 wide tangential surfaces are planed smooth, and you also square up the 2 edges. The first step is to read the board and put the warp down. That way, you can find a good stable foundation at the joiner to joint the wide part of that board flat. Now be sure to use your push blocks to safely work with the workpiece and take no more than a 1/16 of an inch off per pass. Make several passes until the board is perfectly jointed or surface planed flat. The good news is Delta has a complete line of joiners, whether it's the benchtop unit for the small shops or the cast iron bed jointers for the bigger workpieces for those larger projects. Delta has just the right joiner to complement your planer. Now, once the surface of the board is true and flat, the next step is to hold that surface square to the fence, and then you can joint the edge of the board. That way, the edge will be perpendicular to the flat of the board. That's the first 2 steps of S4S'ing your lumber. Now that we've used a joiner to prepare these 2 surfaces, we can now use the thickness planer to thicknesses to the right dimension. That's S3S. Let's get set up here. Make it down 1 turn. I like to take off a 32nd at a time. Now look at that. That's as good as it gets. You have 2 surfaces now that are absolutely parallel and the edge square to both sides. That's called S3S. Now the next step would be, 1 step further, S4S. Take this to the table saw and rip the 2 edges parallel to each other. Now this board will be S4S. Now to take it to the final step, some people refer to this as S6S, you can cross-cut this either at the table saw or with a miter saw to true and accurate given lengths for the project that you're working on. Now that's how you prep your lumber for perfect projects every time. Now let's have some fun with your new planer. Let me show you how to get the most out of it. Here's what truly sets us apart from the pack. This is the 2-speed material feed rate system. And essentially you have 2 settings here. And if you look closely, you can see at the dimensioning speed, well, that moves the lumber through very quickly at a higher feed rate. And so effectively, you get 60 cuts per inch. Now when it's set at 90 cuts per inch, it slows down the feed, so you get more cuts on the surface of the board. It makes it perfectly smooth. Let me show you. Now look at the surface. Guaranteed smooth results every time. Another unique feature on this Delta planer is the full range depth stop. Now what that does, it gives you an accurate way to get repeatable thicknesses at any dimension across the entire height range. That's from 1/8 of an inch to 6.5 inches. Now from here, let me show you how it works. You unlock the head, and look at the depth scale right here. You have a good 1/16 inch scale here on one side, metric on the other. And let's go for an odd dimension. Let's dial in 9/16 of an inch, right on the scale. Once you've set the final thickness, use the depth stop to lock it in. Rotate the top knob clockwise till it comes to a stop. Then press down, rotate the knob, quarter turn. That locks in the final thickness. And from there, it's a simple matter of making multiple passes. The depth stop will stop the cutter head at the preset thickness. Once you've finished planing down all your work pieces to the desired thickness, you need to release the depth stop. But to do that, first raise the cutter head slightly. That releases the lock nut. And to release the stop, rotate the top a quarter turn counterclockwise. The important thing to remember about this feature is that it gives you the ability to preset the thickness for any dimension across the entire height range from 1/8 of an inch to 6.5 inches. What's unique about the cutter head lock is that when you set the lock, it locks the cutter head assembly directly above the cutter head. The key benefit to this unique locking system is that it virtually eliminates snipe, and that's a good thing to have on a planer. Now, I'll unlock it, and this is another unique feature. Take a close look at this. This is the blade zero indicator, and what that does, it gives you the ability to bring a workpiece up and then rotate the cutter head down until this gently springs up. Now watch, as I lower it, what happens? Take your time, and when it's right at the surface, stop. Now, what you can do, there are 2 ways to set your depth of cut right now, because the cutter head knife is exactly at the top of the surface of this board. You can rotate the handle, that's 1/32, this is 1/16. 1 full revolution is a 1/16 of an inch. So you can go by the handle alone, or you can go by the indexing ring right here, which means you zero this in, right here. You bring it to 0 on the scale, and now you can set it for a 64th, a 32nd. You decide how much you want to take off. Lock the cutter head in, and now we're ready to plane it down to the finished thickness. just doesn't get any better. Okay, now from there, eventually the knives will get dull. Let's get set up to show you how easy, safe, and fast it is to change these knives. Now I've turned the planer around so you're looking at the back side or the outfeed side. Make sure when you're working with the knives that you unplug the machine. And here you can see the tops come off. I've taken the manifold off. That's the black part, just two bolts for that. And then I've raised the cutter head at least 3.5 inches. Now what I can do is through this side panel, lower this door and put the cutter head wrench right in on the cutter head. And what that does, that allows me to roll the cutter head around until it's locked in place with this spring assembly. Now I can get at the knife here. And to do that, I use the other side of the cutter head wrench, and with this torque drive screw, what you can do is just ease that right out. You release all the bolts holding the knife in place, and once that's done, we can lift it out with the magnet and turn it around, because these are, after all, reversible knives. Let me get that set up and I'll show you how it's done. Now this is very important. Make sure that the 7 cutter head bolts that hold the knife in place are loosened but not removed. And then I'm using the knife magnet to securely ease the blade out. And this is a double-edged knife. You rotate it around, set it back on the magnet. I insert the blade so it fits right on the indexing pins. If you need to make an adjustment, use the magnet to do that with the blade. When it's in place on the pins, tighten the cutter head bolts back down, and then once that's done, you repeat the same process by rotating the cutter head with the cutter head wrench to the other side and do the exact same thing. And that's just how easy it is to change the cutter head knives. Well, there you have it. I hope what we've covered today has given you some great tips on how to get the most out of your brand new Delta 13-inch 2-speed finishing planer. It's a phenomenal tool. Everything that we covered today is also in the owner's manual, so refer to that if you've forgotten anything that we touched on. Now, the only other thing that I highly recommend that you pursue right now is consider dust collection for all your woodworking tools. And Delta has a full line of dust collectors for the small shop, starting at 1/2 and 1 horsepower units, all the way up to the pro shop. So they have dust collection for absolutely every tool that you have in your shop. And one other thing that they have that's a relatively new innovation are the ambient air cleaners. And take a close look at this. I'll pull the filter out, and this is a standard filter that comes with it that really does the job, but watch. You see that fine dust? Well, even with great dust collection, all that fine particle mist does have a tendency to get out in the shop, and these ambient air cleaners have 2 filter systems. They have the inner filter, and then they have an upgrade filter. This is an electrostatic filter, lifetime filter, and it just eases up and in, and that will guarantee you years of great dust collection. Whether it's a standalone units, the built-in units for a centrally piped system, or the ambient air cleaners, it's something that you'll really enjoy having in your shop. Well, thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time, and be sure to tune in to the American Woodshop on public television. Hey, don't go anywhere. There's one tip left from the American Woodshop. We've talked about how to get the most out of your tools today, but don't forget to work with grain of the lumber. Look closely at this and you'll see the cathedral arch pattern. If you feed the peak of the cathedral arch into the joiner cutter rotation or the planer cutter rotation, it will actually tear up the grain. Reverse it. You work with the cathedral arches, you'll get a smoother cut. That's a great tip, and don't forget to watch the American Woodshop on public television. See you next time.
Delta is proud to sponsor the American Woodshop on public television. Please check your local listings for station and program times.